Twitter is a very weird place. If I didn't do, a YouTube channel for a living, if I didn't have, people who watch my videos to interact with, I wouldn't have a Twitter because, people get all worried, oh, Twitter's gonna go away. Good. Let it go away. Let it burn to the ground, because what happens on Twitter is you get a lot of misinformation. You get a lot of people sharing opinions that are factually incorrect, but because they have a following, because they have an audience, people rally behind them and like, oh, look at you, you're right. Now, I'm not saying that I've been right about everything, but I feel like I have a good track record where if I'm wrong about something, I will say I'm wrong about something. Hey, there was no Metroid Prime remaster that came out this year. There was no Legend of Zelda double pack. And of course, the Nintendo Switch Pro, although it should be out, does not exist quite yet. So I have no problem being wrong, but a lot of people on Twitter do have a problem being wrong. And today we're going to talk about these Twitter journalists, these video game checkmarks, which I am a video game checkmark myself. I don't know why they gave me a checkmark, but they did, and how they're just spouting this misinformation and people are going along with it. And because I'm a petty person, call me Richard, I have to make a video about this. This, of course, is all stemming from the fact that recently Xbox announced that they're going to be doing $70 first-party games starting in 2023, following along in the footsteps of the PlayStation 5. Now, a lot of people are upset by this, rightfully so. It's never fun to pay more for stuff. You want to be cheap as a consumer. You want to spend as least amount of money as you can, especially in this economy. But I personally can't get super mad about Xbox raising the price of their games. I could have faked the video and outraged and be like, $70 Xbox games, that's crazy. But I have to be realistic. I have Game Pass. I don't buy first-party Xbox titles. If I really like a first-party Xbox game, I'll buy it down the road when it's on sale or a used copy to, at least get a physical copy of the game. But at the end of the day, these companies are making bank on these games because of things like Game Pass. So I can't stomach and muster up the energy to be like, I'm so mad, let's be mad together, like a lot of people probably were about this situation. But that's not the problem here. That's not what I'm here to talk about today. It does have to do with video game pricing though, because when Xbox announced that they were going to the $70 price point, a lot of these people, people who work within the video game industry, higher ups that are editors and senior editors at most of the big websites that you read, had this take on Twitter. And it was so stupid because it's a false equivalency is what it is, because it's an apples and oranges type of situation. And that, of course, is talking about the back in my day situation. The back in my day, video games were more expensive. You should be grateful that they're only this price, this, that, and the other. On the surface level, okay, maybe we should be grateful as video game players that the prices of these games aren't, doubling and tripling over the years and stuff like that. But it has nothing to do with the yesteryear of video games. And to compare the two is just absolutely ridiculous. And let's just talk about why this is, because if you think about it and you actually live through that era and you actually, study the history of video games, it's clear as day as to why those games were more expensive. So let's take, for instance, the N64 era. That's something that a lot of people like to bring up because N64 game pricing was wildly all over the place. It was the wild, wild west. I remember when the N64 first came out. I did not get one on launch, but my uncle did. And I remember going to Toys R Us to shop for some games with my uncle. You would commonly see Super Mario 64 at $59.99. Pilot Wings was usually about that price as well. And then you had games like Wayne Gretzky 3D Hockey for $74.99. $74.99 for an arcade hockey game on the N64. So people are very quick to point out, situations like that. Look at the N64, look at certain Super Nintendo games. Now, why were the prices of those games $74.99? Why was Wayne Gretzky 3D Hockey, which great game, by the way, but obviously it doesn't hold a candle to the legitimacy and the longevity of something like Super Mario 64. Why was that game so much more expensive than Super Mario 64? Because of production costs. You see, this is something that gets completely lost in the modern video game era. The way that video games are made, the way that video games are produced, the way that video games are manufactured is completely different than it was during that time frame. Super Mario 64 came in at $60 for a multitude of reasons. It was a first-party Nintendo 64 title, meaning that there was a gap in the steps that you have to take in order to get this game out there. With a game like Super Mario 64, you have the cartridge, you have the box, you have the full color manual, and you have all that sort of stuff. But beyond that, you have the actual cartridge itself. Do you know how much it cost to make an N64 cartridge? Just to get the actual cartridge was about $30. So half of the price of Super Mario 64 goes strictly to the cost of producing this cartridge, okay? Follow me on this. It's very basic and it's very easy. Of course, you have chips on PCB boards with these games as well. You have a lot of stuff going on. There are games that came out for the N64, games that came out for the Super Nintendo of varying sizes. So you have to do things like have various cartridge sizes in order to get that. And spoiler alert, the more expensive, the bigger cartridge you need to use, the more expensive it's going to be. But going back to the N64 thing, Nintendo themselves created Super Mario 64. Nintendo themselves were the ones who controlled the distribution of the cartridges themselves. So really, Nintendo would make the game, they would print the game, they would send it to stores, and they would get their cut. When it came to a third-party game, such as Wayne Gretzky's 3D Hockey at $74.99 at Toys R Us in Milford, frickin' Connecticut, there's a reason why it was $74.99, because you also have to factor in that the company, who I believe was Midway, that produced this game, you had to buy the cartridge from Nintendo. So you're losing out on money there. So Nintendo themselves has to supply you with the cartridge. You have to decide, how many of these copies are we going to make? Is this going to be a huge print game, or is it going to be something that we're going to do in a limited quantity because we don't want to be stuck with a lot of these cartridges? Then they also have to pay the middleman at the brick and mortar store, which gets a percentage of the sales. You see, there was reasons, valid reasons, as to why the price of games back then was so high from time to time. And that was simply because of the fact that it cost more to manufacture these games. You don't have situations back in the 90s like you do now with something like digital distribution. Okay, the whole medium has shifted to UHD Blu-rays. Do you know how much a UHD Blu-ray costs to have? It's $1 per thing, not $30, $1 per disc. Most of these discs have absolutely nothing on them. But you also have, like I said, the whole digital distribution that doesn't have a physical product. And then people will say, well, RGT, what about the cost of making a game? You can't compare the cost of making a game from the 90s to the cost of making a game today. Budgets are so much bigger. All of these, bells and whistles, you got to have all this stuff. Look at the medium of video games then versus now. Look at the amount of revenue that video games generate then versus now. The video game industry back in the 90s was still considered to be a kid's medium. It wasn't, adults played it, but like if you were an adult who played video games in the 90s, like people would think, what's wrong with this guy? He needs to be, drinking beer and smacking his wife in the head. Why is he playing video games? Like it was a completely different era. Video game sales of both systems and software were nothing like they were in the modern era. You didn't have all these development tools. You didn't have all these different engines that you have access to in order to create your game. There's a reason why a person, an individual person, can make a video game and find success within the video game industry in the modern era because of things like distribution, because of things like Steam, the Nintendo eShop, the PSN, Xbox Live. It's a completely different ball game. You have all these proprietary engines that anyone can use, something like Unreal Engine 4, to create your own game within this. You have asset packs, you have this, that, and the other. But the real reason is because there's so much freaking money in video games now. Companies are getting angel investors to, invest in these games. People, you would have never seen that back in the day. No company would have put their reputation on the line to invest in a game because they felt that this game could be very successful and they could get a good return on their money. The money has completely changed in the past 30 years. It is a completely different beast. The video game industry generates the most revenue out of any entertainment medium, bigger than Hollywood, bigger than movies, bigger than music. Like, there's a reason why everything has changed. So to compare the prices of video games in the 90s to the prices of video games in 2022 and 2023 is misinformation. It's disingenuous because they're completely different ball games. I don't even know why I'm so worked up about this. I think it's just whenever, a bad take gets on Twitter and everyone just sort of, rallies behind it and stuff like that. Like, people don't think. And then I make a tweet, being a dick about it, and people are like, you're wrong, you're wrong. It's like, I'm not wrong. I'm not wrong about this. There is no way, shape, or form that I am wrong about this. I've had developers talk to me and say, you know what, you're right. Like, it's just crazy to me. There's a reason for that. You think these modern companies hire video game testers? Do you understand how video games were distributed? If I bought an N64 cartridge and that game had a big glaring bug in it, guess what? That game just sucked. You couldn't patch the game. Game software testers were a huge thing. They don't exist anymore. It's all in-house stuff. It's all people just trying to, mess with the game in a bare minimum, and then they ship it out there. That's why games ship with so many issues nowadays. It's not necessarily a quality issue. It's that they axed one of the biggest divisions of quality assurance in video games. It has nothing to do with the Nintendo seal of quality. It has to do with the fact that a job category doesn't exist anymore. There's not these independent testers working on stuff anymore because you just patch it. You just patch it. Patch Adams. I don't know why I got so worked up about this. You would think I would get worked up about the $70 games from Xbox, but I don't care. It bothers me that people just say this dumbass stuff and then people just go along with it without even thinking about it. So be knowledgeable. You see one of your friends talking about back in my day, let them know why back in their day it was more expensive. I thought it was pretty damn clear cut. There's a reason why we hyped up things like megabits on a cartridge. If any company should be raising the price, it should be Nintendo. Let's be realistic, because those cartridges are expensive as hell, and there's different sizes of the cartridges. Like, they should be the company that's raising the price of stuff, because they actually have to spend money to manufacture these cartridges comparative to a UHD Blu-ray. All right, I'm done. I'm not going to go on anymore. Am I completely wrong on this? If I am, let me know in the comments section. And you know what? I'll give you a thumbs up, because I just don't see how I'm wrong about this. The whole industry has changed. So to sit there and be like, back in my day, it just makes you look dumb in my eyes. Thank you for watching this video, if you watch this video. And as always, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Later.